Well, folks, welcome to the Reality Cheque, CHEQUE webinar. With me today, I've got three of the smartest people that I know in the Western agricultural sphere. We've got David Sullivan from Global Ag Risk Solutions. We've got Evan Schultz from Maverick Ag. And we have Dean Klippenstine from MNP. So we have quite the panel. It's going to be a really good conversation today, and I want to get right to it. But the only other thing I want to say before I start asking questions and letting these three gents roll in the way that only they can is, folks, this is all about you. This is solutions for you and your business. We want to get you excited about going into this year, even given the changing landscape. According to Dean Klippenstine, I'm going to quote him before he even starts talking, there's more tools here in Western Canada than ever before, and we're in a good position to ride out what's coming, but we need tools, we need coaches, we need PMA, positive mental attitude. These folks here can give you some hope and some good ideas, but ask questions. This is for you, about you. Once we get rolling, hopefully we can get done in an hour, but if it has to go a little bit longer because we're getting great value out of the conversation, we'll keep going. You can ask me questions in the chat. You can ask me questions in the Q&A. It's going to be incredible. So I'd really encourage you guys to send me a note. I will make sure we get to your questions, I promise. Unless they're really personal questions about Dean's life, then we might have to defer them to later. I don't know what Dean's going to reveal on the webinar today. You never know. You never know. Dean's a very open individual. But this webinar came out of a conversation that I had with David Sullivan, who I'm well aware has been going out and budgeting and quoting and budgeting for Global Ag Risk Solutions production insurance, which is great. I always saw an alignment between what we do, and I think it's a great tool for producers, and I really like their process that gives folks situational awareness. But he made me aware that there's something that he estimates less than 10% of producers are aware of, likely is going to affect about 80% of the folks out there, and could get you 80 cents on the dollar back on your inputs. So Dave, start us off. Tell us where folks are at with that this year. Tell us what's happening in this crazy Western agricultural world right now.
Well, I think after talking to you, I felt like jumping off a bridge for the first 10 minutes because everything was about how bad it was and how nobody was buying biosol because of the prices of their grain that they grew last year have dropped, and next year's budget looks like, a 30% drop from last year's budget. And which is all true. Like commodity prices are down. A lot of guys didn't sell a lot of that grain that they had in the bin from last year, maybe early enough in hindsight. And that is really making budgets look pretty bad. And it's, a combination of a drop in commodity prices, but at the same time, we're still seeing pretty high input costs, a little bit of relief on fertilizer, but not enough. And, our fixed costs are through the roof. We've committed to, we've re-upped on machinery. We've bought new buildings, new bins, new bin systems, a lot of concrete, a lot of shiny tin, a lot of shiny iron. You need a pair of sunglasses to be on a farm these days with all the new things, Cadillac Escalades and houses in Phoenix and different things. And we've committed to all of those expenses for the long term, and the commodity prices that we were enjoying didn't last. So now reality's got to set in, bottom line. But what most guys don't understand is the thing that they have access to that makes this not as bad as it could be is agri-stability. And the government, it's often criticized, and it has its problems, that program. But the way the math is working this year, that is probably the number one solution for most farms, is that agri-stability is going to cover, and potentially for a lot of guys, they're going to be in a claim before they've even started putting a crop in the ground, unless they grow a monster crop, which is a great solution when you have an insurance. It's not really an insurance, it's a government program, but that's going to cover, start triggering before you grow your average crop at today's commodity prices. That's a great program to have access to. And we still know it's very poorly subscribed to, just because guys they think about it from the past, about it took a long time to get my money, or I expected to get money and I didn't. Working with some experts, you can find out really quickly what position you're in. And we're seeing it over and over and over, where agri stability is going to trigger before your global ag risk solutions is going to trigger before your crop insurance. It's probably triggering, almost guaranteed to trigger. That's a very different situation than we've ever had in my 20 years of being in the farm community.
I'm triggered just by your talking. So hopefully the programs will also trigger. We got some other folks on the call. That's a great summary, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts. I love what you guys do in consultation. I mean, you call yourselves advisors for a reason. How do the other panelists seeing this shaping up? Like, let's chime in on the summary here. Who wants to take this one first? I see, Dean, you took yourself off mute.
Yeah, well, Dave hit the nail on the head. Is if you understand ag stability, and as far as my opinion as a cold-hearted capitalist, fiscal conservative, as a taxpayer, I'm not a big fan. But as an ag advisor, it's a powerful, cost-effective tool. And Dave hit the nail on the head that the only thing better than being in an ag stability payment is growing yourself out of one. Because it's impossible to be financially worse off if you outgrow your coverage. And so it's a fabulous, fabulous tool. And so if your advisor tells you to be in ag stability and you grow a crop so good that you don't get a payment, pat yourself on the back. That's excellent. And go fill the war chest and go fight another year. So good summary, Dave.
And what about you, Evan? What are you seeing out there right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not any different thought process across the three of us. The big thing for me is the work's been done. I mean, we've had 3 or 4 decent years, whether you claimed insurance or whether you grew the crop. We've built the agri stability margin up. And because we've done that, the hard part's over. So now, as Dave said, for once, and I mean, I've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. I've never seen this before, to the point where agri stability is probably your strongest insurance. It has the most coverage between, your inputs, labor, utilities. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of different cost structures in there that have seen increases in price. So you're going to gain that as well. And the way they price it out for inventory, you probably have a chance at prior year inventories that you didn't sell that you should have, getting into that calculation as well. So, I mean, from that standpoint, like I said, you've done the work. Let agri stability do what it's supposed to. And guess what? It's the most subsidized program. It is the best one right now.
Yep. I just want to clarify that I don't disagree with my 2 younger colleagues, but I have seen this. I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen it a few times where the floor was so high, it lets you swing for the fence and with a ridiculously comfortable fallback position. So
it seems a little bit about farming the programs. Dave, you got some real world examples of this. You can show us the math on how this is reflecting on different folks' farms. What fascinates me about this global agri solutions as a whole is you get a snapshot not only of where your farm is at, but where your farm is at relative to everybody else. As much as we're neighbors and friends, there's some element of pure competition in farming. Let's face it. You're all producing against the backdrop of the ultimate competition. What are you seeing as you go out there? How can this be, and what are the real numbers some folks are looking at here?
Yeah, and I think you got to take a step back because a lot of people don't understand the program. Can you see my main slide?
Can somebody give me a thumbs up or like a funny emoticon that indicates you can see this? Justin Kelly raised his hand. We got a lot of raised hands. It's like a rave. It's like an agricultural webinar rave.
We're just not seeing the full slide, Dave. We're seeing your notes page.
Oh, well, let me switch that. Sure.
There we go.
Perfect. Now we're working. So I think because it's poorly subscribed, it's often poorly understood. So you got to understand where the math is coming from, and then you can get into where we are today. So agri stability is based on a 5-year Olympic average. You see my mouse cursor on there?
We can.
So that 5 years is the most recent 5 years. So this is 2023, 22, 21, 20, 19. So we're using 19 through 23 to do the calculation of the reference margin. And we're seeing back, if you had great results, you had very high revenue and margin. So this is, yield times price minus seed, fert, chem, fuel, off-farm labor. What else am I missing, Evan?
A little bit of freight and trucking, some utilities, stuff like that.
So those things get put into each year. So you take your revenue, and so your grain revenue plus any insurance payouts minus all of those expenses. That creates a margin for each year. You look at those 5 years, you knock out the high, you knock out the low, and that creates this Olympic average. So you've got the 3 years in the middle, creates a reference margin, and then agri-stability triggers at 70% of that historical reference margin. Now, that seems like, 70% is a big deductible and you're subtracting all those expenses. But in the program year, when we're looking at this year's crop plan, what's happened is that the reference margin, when we convert it into revenue, we add back all of those expenses plus that reference margin. We have guys triggering up at $580 worth of revenue is where their agri-stability is going to start to trigger at 80 cents on the dollar. And their crop plan, because of the drop in commodity prices, is below the revenue trigger. It's either below or oftentimes right touch and go, like right at it. Whereas normally we would see this number to be 70%, below the crop line. It wouldn't be triggering until way down here. That would be normal. But this year, because of the drop in commodity prices, and we're using the 5 years of prior of, either really good results or a bad result plus a really big insurance indemnity, that reference margin is based off of 5 historically high years. And then we drop into today's economics, and it means that the agri-stability is covering and starting to trigger above what our budgeted crop plan is today. Average yields, today's commodity prices as we're forecasting them for next fall, the agri-stability is actually going to be triggering, at or above their planned crop. As Dean said, this has happened a couple of times, but it's maybe 2 or 3 times in Dean's life. That's a long time.
Hurtful doesn't mean it's wrong, just it's still hurtful, Dave. One of the things, and we talked about, you touched on farming the program, Dan, and that's where I want to really hammer home, is that because of the design and the perfect integration between global ag risk and ag stability, which is something I'm a strong personal proponent of, that it allows you to still grow and aggressively pursue the best crop you can. Because Dave talked about it, he's talking about November prices predicting. Well, the only thing I know is Warren Buffett can't predict the world price of oil. I guarantee none of us can predict the world price of commodities 6 months from now. And so what we have to do every year in commodity agriculture production, and to be fair, commodity anything production, we have to aggressively do the best job we can every single year. And then when Mother Nature and the markets throw us a softball, knock it out of the park. And what Dave's talking about sets the stage for that. And I guarantee Evan and his large client base are dialing in their insurance combinations and then going for the biggest crop they can.
I hope that's true for the sake of my non-farming sibling inheritance.
As Dean said, we don't know the price of the commodities. Like what are we going to sell our grain for next year? If it's higher than we anticipate, well, that's going to be a good problem to have. If it's lower than we currently anticipate, it's going to make this even more important. And the cost of the program to be in it is what's the fee, Dean? 41 cents for every $1,000. Something
yeah,
like that?
I don't even know. It's
Ridiculously
insignificant.
Well, I think what it comes back to is we only get so many chances to do this as farmers. And I mean, taking a year off might protect you, but at the same time, it's one less year you have to hit that home run. And we don't get a lot of home runs. I mean, we've seen a few up cycles in my career, at least, but if there's a chance to go for it, you go for it. So that's the proponent of a lot of the farms that I work with is we're not taking years off.
Well, to quote an old hard-ass old client of mine, a buddy of mine from the deep south in Saskatchewan, he goes, we only get high prices and high yields 4 times or 5 times in our life. And you got to make sure in a farming career, the collision of both of those don't happen very often. Some careers, they happen 8 times, some they happen 2. But you got to be really prepared to execute when those come along.
And we got to be a little conscious, like we're calling a disaster $13 canola right now. 4 years ago, we were selling 9. So, I mean, there's still that, whatever you want to call it, the quote of new normal, that doesn't exist. Agriculture has ups and downs, and that's just the way ag is.
And what happens if it goes to 9?
If it goes to 9, yeah, we're deeper into this, right? We're deeper into this agri-stability payout in your crop plan, because your crop plan is getting worse and worse as that $9 canola starts to trigger. But we get a year of this agri-stability cover if we buy into the program. Dean, I don't know what's the uptake on the program as a percentage of grain farmers?
I apologize. I don't know those macro numbers, Dave, but it's not near as high as it is. And even in our office, we aggressively refresh producers why they have to do it, because we yell and holler and bang our fist on the table. But folks that don't get that, they're missing the bus. And I don't want to jump ahead in your presentation, Dave. Are you going to talk about how global ag risk and or crop insurance protect that margin strengthening going forward?
Yep.
Okay, good. I won't.
I just want to make one technical note here. I just got a message that the chat is disabled, and of course I'm Googling my AI advisor, whatever they have these days. But I think the Q&A is working, and I do want to hear from you folks. This is your opportunity. We got more IQ farming program IQ in this virtual room than you can shake a stick at. Go into the Q&A and ask your questions, but keep rolling. David, you were rolling there.
I just see you got it highlighted as hosts and panelists. You need to go down and highlight everyone in the chat.
Okay.
In the drop down.
And Dave, I was going to say in 2020, the agri-stability stats were under 25% of farms in Canada.
Yeah, and of the grain farms, I think M&P's been a big proponent of it. So maybe we're at 50%, of all grain farms, and maybe there's fewer cattle guys that are in that. Although I think cattle guys will be jumping into the program pretty soon now that they've had some good years under their belt, that the program maybe is going to start working again for them. But that comment that Dean made, so where Global Ag got excited about this is that this crop plan and this agri-stability program year revenue, where it's going to trigger, is based off of them buying what they've traditionally bought. Insurance premiums are a eligible expense, so it increases the agri-stability trigger point when you spend more money on insurance premiums. And Global Ag not being subsidized, often our premiums are more than what traditional crop insurance is. So when we buy some Global Ag cover, we add the Global Ag cover, it's triggering below the crop plan because we're an insurance company, we need a deductible. The additional premiums, this is a $30 premium, takes our trigger point up from $580 to $610. The crop plan hasn't changed, but your agri-stability potential payout or potential trigger point has. And then what the likely scenario is creating is that we're going to grow this crop plan or somewhere around it, because that's historically what we've done based on our yields and the crop plan we've got in place and the projected revenue for next year. very likely that premium is going to be paid for 80 cents on the dollar. Now, depending on next year's results, if we grow a monster crop or we have a big run up in price, then that won't be true. But in the case that it is, you'll be damn glad you had it, because this coverage also lets you spend more money on inputs. So if we put extra inputs on the farm, we end up spending more on biosol, more on insecticides, more on fungicides, more top dress. All those extra inputs add additional. And in this chart, it's blowing out the top of my chart because I'm not very good at making graphics. So my chart's not exactly the scale, but the additional premium and those extra inputs are likely to be paid 80 cents on the dollar.
You're great with crayons. You're great with crayons.
Yeah, my crayons are pretty good.
Well, I got some questions here, but keep going.
But that situation where we're looking at the ability to use the farm program, and it actually gives us a very good baseline level of coverage, baseline level of protection. We can combine it with extra insurance, and those premiums are likely to be 80% paid. So a $30 GARS premium turns it into a $6 GARS premium net of the offset that you're going to get from agri-stability. Plus, go and farm the heck out of it and add those extra inputs and really try and go for it. Those extra inputs stack onto your GARS coverage, but it also stacks onto your agri-stability coverage, because that's how the two programs work, right?
I hope Terry's starting up the 4-wheel drive, because I feel like we have a plan here. Finally, like, let's go. Let's go.
It's not as doom and gloom as everybody sort of is looking at. If you think about where the programs all are, it is actually, for a lot of guys, whether they had great crops in the last few years or not a great crop plus a huge insurance payout, many guys are sitting staring at this opportunity where they can then, get their insurance premium covered, plus then you actually have the insurance coverage. And in the event that we end up in a claim situation, so Global Ag has the advantage where traditional crop insurance doesn't. So a couple of years ago, we lobbied the government to change private insurance so that if you get a claim from crop insurance, it reduces the claim on your agri-stability. So for every dollar you get from crop insurance is 80 cents less you're going to get from agri-stability. If you get a claim from private insurance, like Global Ag, it does not reduce the claim you get from agri-stability. So if you get $1 from Global Ag and PCI, you still get the 80 cents from agri-stability. So your financial position in a bad year, because you can stack the two products and they compound on top of each other, can be much better than traditional crop insurance. I'm not saying there isn't a place for traditional crop insurance. It's just an advantage that we get that traditional crop insurance doesn't, because it's subsidized by the same people. Traditional crop insurance and agri-stability are heavily subsidized by the federal and provincial governments.
We had some questions here. I just wanted to shout them out for the benefit of the group. Thanks so much for the questions. Let's keep it rolling. Obviously, no shortage of answers on the call. So the questions really feed the answers. But from anonymous attendee, are the benefits accruing to agri-stability the same even if one has been out of the program for several years? So Dean already answered it, but let's hear it. Let's hear it verbally here.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. Absolutely, you can re-enter the program. It's just you got to pay your accounting firm or do yourself, which I never recommend, to get the history put back into the system. And so it's a bit of an admin cost hassle, but making sure you're in before the deadline is paramount in importance in my expert opinion.
Evan, how many of your folks are in agri-stability, number one? And number two, how many folks that aren't working with you do you estimate are in agri-stability?
Well, first of all, I don't have a client that's not in agri-stability, and part of it is for this reason, and part of it, I mean, like I said before, it covers a significant amount of expenses as well as the marketing side. So from my perspective, I don't, not that I don't allow guys, but it's more of a real hard push, much like Dean and MNP have, is that it's subsidized. It's the program I want you in. It's kind of the base of how I build most of my large scale programs. Now, outside of me, like I said before, I know before we hit the pandemic and a whole bunch of ups and downs and volatility, a great portion were not in the program. I mean, MNP has a large client book, but there's 190 some thousand farms in Canada. The program itself is very not well attended. Let's call it that way.
Why is that?
A little bit of.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say a little bit of not understanding the program itself. And then B, as Dean said, it. I've heard it referred to as the accountant's program more times than I know what to say. But it's literally because of the complicated act of actually filing it that it deters a lot of people, and they just don't understand how it works.
Dean, are you prepared to defend accountants everywhere on that count? Are you going to step up to this moment in time?
So quick side note story. I went back into the pods one day and there's a bunch of young guys there, and they talked about, and these are a bunch of young studs who used to play WHL or SJHL hockey, and then when they're in their younger years, dreamed of playing in the NHL. And I said, "How's things going, fellas?" And they said, "Oh, good, Dean." I said, "Well, didn't you guys want to play in the NHL?" I said, "Accounting's what happens when dreams fail." Like,
oh, come on.
That's your mother's fallback position. Make sure you get your accounting degree just in case you don't make the NHL.
Well, it's worked out okay for you, so let's be real.
Yeah, luckily I wasn't burdened with enough talent to ever consider playing in the NHL. But actually, the accounting profession as a whole, MNP's done a lot of work to build the horsepower to make sure our growers could be engaged in this program. Lots of the accounting firms out there and they're not bad folks, they're just overwhelmed with day-to-day filings and compliance in all the other government regulations and taxes and the never-ending bureaucratic flow of information. And so they are also not very big fans of it, because after a massive busy season, the last thing they want to do is grind through a whole bunch of difficult to understand egg stability program filings. And so not just the farmers, but the industry hasn't done a very good job. Evans, the gleaning light, where his customers are solidly engaged in the process, and I can't emphasize the importance enough.
Well said, Dean. You said it's more of a specialist thing, which obviously takes some scale, which is where M&P come in, because maybe the smaller firms just can't wade into those waters. It's choppy big waves. You need a big boat.
And it's not about small firms. I want to make sure I clarify that. It's about folks who have enough dedicated resources that they actually have enough capacity. So this is not about big firms are better than small firms. It's about making sure you're at a firm with enough that focuses enough on agriculture to have capacity. There's some great single shingle shops who do a great job of this.
Well said.
And I think, Dean, and we see it in the numbers that we review at Global Ag, is that agri-stability cost, the fee is almost nothing. And then the cost of the accounting, I'd say, ranges in that kind of $1 to $2 per acre, depending on the size of the farm and the complexity of it. And that, for $2 an acre, I was looking at a large farm this week. He's getting $3 million of coverage, triggering at his, basically at 100% of his crop plan for $1 an acre. That's a very different circumstance than traditional crop insurance, which is 15 plus an acre. Global Ag could be 20, 25. For $1 an acre, that's a pretty good program to be in.
Yeah.
A comment here. Go ahead, Dean. Sorry.
Just to make sure we're not wishy-washy on what our advice is. Every one of my personal growers, I absolutely recommend they do a Global Ag coverage level, egg stability, and crop insure they're high risk crop. So if you had lentils in the Regina Plains, you're probably more concerned about flooding. If you had canola in the southwest part of Saskatchewan, you're probably more worried about drought. So area specific, that's my absolute always combination. Because what Dave talked about, not cannibalizing an ag stability payment and giving a financial certain floor that is impenetrable and you can't go below.
I'd also like to stack on that, Dean, that you also, as a top accountant in Western Canada, recommend biosol to all your personal growers.
All my growers know and understand that they should not take agronomic advice from Dean because he's not smart enough. You can take agronomic advice from Dave. The big ginger's got a lot, forgot more about agronomy than I've ever known.
I hope someone's got him that t-shirt. If not, make a mental note here for Christmas. Hey, Barry Rutledge, we got so many great comments. I want to get to what the folks are wanting here. Barry Rutledge made a comment, caution on ag stability as internal rules can change due to budget constraints. These changes are not understood by ministers, which cost share this. And Dean, you said excellent point. That's why I always strongly am in favor of GARS, CI, agri stability, biosol combo. I added that biosol part, but I mean, it's all good. Any comments on that, or
who wants to wade into that?
Well, I can tell you, in my opinion, I don't think the program will change in the crop year, but I do believe that this program may change because of this market dynamic. We might see the margin limiting come back or some form of it. That would be my guess. Whether that's next year or the year after, who knows? But yeah, it's definitely it's a business risk, which, as Dean said, make sure you've got other insurance products built into your plan because there is a risk. So I'm going to wade into that, and I might get yelled at by various people, including my bosses, but I don't care. What's actually Dave's incorrect. We've had internal communications probably 15 years ago with senior advisors when these other historic programs had got to a level that they were virtually, that the farms were bulletproof. And they said, if we have a catastrophic event in Western Canada, there's no uncertain terms. We will absolutely have to change the program because the coffer, the fiscal position is not possible for payout. So payments, I believe, if we have a major event, will absolutely be ratcheted down. And so that's important to distinguish. And Barry would understand this better. And it was not Barry that I talked to back in the day. The senior advisor is no longer there. But crop insurance is the Crown can't change crop insurance payout formula. Dave can't change his insurance contract that he signed. The reinsurers have committed and been bound and legally bound by this. Ag stability can absolutely be changed. It's not in legislation. And so that's not picking on the folks in the government, and that's not picking on ag stability. It's a different program, and it's significant in provinces where the ag risk is small relative to the financial affairs of the province. It's not going to change. But in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, especially, and Saskatchewan especially, there's a significant financial risk out there for a relatively small finance. Okay, AJ, bring in AJ. He'll clarify that.
When are you going to be running for office, Dean? When are you going to be running for office here? Okay, I'll bring in AJ here. Participants, he should be alphabetically superior. AJ, I want to allow you to talk. Hopefully you're not in a compromising position. You want me to allow AJ to talk? This is a big,
allow AJ. AJ's the ag stability boss of the.
advanced Jedi move here for a webinar. I don't know what's going to happen.
Hey, AJ, are you there?
AJ?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can't see you, but I don't know. Maybe that's appropriate given your situation. I mean, this is just impromptu.
I'm okay. I'm just out here on vacation, but I got a message that Dean's going to be on this webinar, so I didn't want to miss that.
Have you been to Strategic Coach? Like, is it, you're not, have you heard of free days?
AJ, give us your 30-second bio, and then
the 30 seconds. I'll clarify that point. So it's not as easy to make any changes to the agri-stability program. So these
back up, AJ. Give us your bio first, buddy.
Oh, sorry. So I work with MNP. I lead our ag risk management resources, mostly agri-stability, GARS, private insurance that helps strategize risk management plans for farmers. And I'm the national leader with MNP. And prior to MNP, I've had experience working both with the federal and the provincial governments. I've been in this BRM space for 20 plus years. So the only thing I wanted to clarify, and I just reached out to Dean as the question was arising around the changes can be made to the agri-stability program. It's not as easy as it may sound. So any policy change on the BRM programs, 2/3 of the provinces have to agree to it before they can make a change within the 5-year agreement that we have. So these programs are negotiated federally, provincially, 60-40 funded, and they are negotiated 5 years at a time. And once those agreements are signed, in order for them to change any guidelines or any policy, they have to 2/3 of the provinces have to agree to that change. So I just wanted to clarify that if the money's there, the budget's there, it's not that if moving forward, they might project. So most of these programs are projected ahead. So they've already gotten the projections done for the next 2 years. They know what they're going to spend on it. So sometime when they're negotiating, the changes will happen because they know that, 3 years down the road, they have an idea what the spend is going to be. If it's, that's what happened a number of years ago when they had brought in the RML. And again, that was negotiated at federal provincial table, and the RML was introduced, and all the provinces and the federal government had to agree to it before it was signed. So
thank you, AJ.
Yeah,
great information there. Kind of sounds like the weather. Nothing that we can. I mean, they're gonna do what they're gonna do, right? But I was gonna ask you how you like working with Dean, but we probably don't have time to get into that. So we'll just. I kind of want to bring it back in here too. And we got lots of good questions. I want to get to them. So we got about 22 minutes left on the hour. We may go longer if I'm feeling the vibe, which I kind of am, but I want to be respectful too of those people that invested their time to come here and ask questions too. So, so GARS is an allowable expense. Is it considered allowable income? I understand it doesn't work against your ag stab claim, but does it help keep your ag stab margin up?
Correct. So global ag premiums are an eligible expense. In the program year, it is not an eligible revenue, but in your reference margin calculation in the future, any claim from global ag is eligible revenue. So it's really, we get the kind of our cake and eat it too. So we don't reduce the agri-stability claim in the year of a claim, but we increase the reference margin for future years.
Beautiful. Any other comments on that?
What I think the one thing we got to keep in mind is that we're not telling anybody just to go agri-stability by itself. So worried about changes to the program, worried about all that stuff. That is most of the guys that I deal with. They're using probably all 3 programs, much like Dean, but at the very least, they're mixing in 2 programs. Just for that reason is a lot of my guys are larger scale, and that $3 million cap on agri-stability tends to hold guys back a little bit, but it's just more of it's a tool in the toolbox, as we've talked before. And you want a whole bunch of tools in a year. You don't just want to rely on one.
Well, much like Dean had an overarching message, I think my message that I wanted to get across to people in our tribe is, hey, work with experts. These are the kind of opportunities you want to be aware of, especially in a year like this. I mean, maybe it has been like shooting fish in a barrel, but things are going to get a little bit more challenging here, which makes for great character, in my humble opinion. I don't know. It's always worked on me. look at my character. Do you not need to be in a SCIC in order to fully realize full proceeds from agri-stability?
So you're talking about the negative, the negative margin clawback, Dean or Evan. You're probably better versed in it than I am.
So yes, you are correct. If you're not within the dual programs, SCIC and agri-stability, you lose some of your negative margin coverage. So any crop below your inputs, below your margin. However, that's where when we mix in a little bit of global ag risk, or however you multifacet your tools, it cleans up and it protects you for those areas that you might lose if you're not in one or the other program. So there is a mixture out there, and another reason not for going agri-stability only.
So the 70% clawback is they do a calculation. They assume you were 70% minimum crop insurance on all of your commodities. They do a calculation to figure out what you would have claimed at that 70% level. And then that becomes eligible revenue essentially in your calculation, but only impacts in a situation where you're in a negative margin. So your crop revenue is less than all your eligible expenses. So that's a pretty catastrophic year. As Evan said, if we combine it with global ag to underpin the product, then it ends up being agri-stability shuts off, and then global ag is picking up everything after that anyways. So you're actually not unprotected. And oftentimes, as Evan and Dean have both said, and most of my advisors would recommend, often some level of crop insurance regardless.
When you were in a payment year, it used to be a 70 cents payout on the dollar. When did it change to 80 cents?
Was that 2 years ago? Yeah, it was at 80 cents. It went to 70. Then now it's at 80 again. So it's a 70% deductible, and then it's an 80% cover all the way down.
Beauty. Barry Rutledge says, go ahead,
sorry.
Dean. Go ahead, Dean. Yeah, please add more.
If I was gonna have folks get one simple number from their accountant or ag stability advisor, don't get caught up in the weeds of the absolute dollars or the noise. Just get your ag stability coverage per acre. And then a real simple example, if that's $300 an acre ag stability, then you start getting paid at $210 ag stability margin. So get everything dialed back to a per acre, because it's simpler to understand on your farm. When guys like AJ and his team throw the mountain of numbers they have at it, it's a little overwhelming. So make sure you drill everything down to a per acre, and then Dave's 30% discount before you start getting paid starts to make a little more sense. Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I think it needs to be clear, like we're talking about straight grain farms. I mean, if a guy's got a big mixed farm with a feedlot or big cow-calf operation, and it has to be big relative to their grain farm, all of everything we're talking about, take with a very much a big grain of salt, because that complicates the situation.
We're taking everything with a grain of salt here today. Everything, like it's just one big umbrella grain of salt.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
The 70, 80, yeah, that 80 changed a couple of years ago, and back, I think it was during COVID they changed it actually.
Great question here from Barry Rutledge. I think somebody's going to want to chomp into this one with excitement and enthusiasm. Barry says, new to GARS and can't understand which option to enroll in. Have very strong CI numbers, very good ag stab, looking to cover the top side, fear of poor yields to just above claim. So basically looking to preserve equity. What say you?
Yeah, I'm going to pop up a slide. So global ag, we have all sorts of options that we have to mix and match with. You can buy our full coverage, you can buy positive margin only, you can buy bands, but we built these ag wrap products a number of years ago when they changed the rules so that global ag was not an eligible revenue during the program year. So now we've got these ag wraps. So we cover 100% of the negative margin, and then we cover that 30%. This was built back when agri stability was 70% payout. We have a 30% that covers off that sliver that agri stability doesn't cover. Now it's got a small, 10% overlap, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then we've built these other programs where we call them AgRap 50 and AgRap 100. So we cover 100% of the negative margin, 30% of that sliver along the side, and then we'll also add a $100 or $50 band on top to pick up a portion of that risk. And all of these combinations are complex, and so a lot of it takes time working with an advisor like Evan or like AJ's team or like our salespeople, our advisors that are on the road. And you have to look and weigh all your options. And I'll give from my personal experience on our farm when I was farming with Dad, we bought a different type of coverage every year. We looked at this on a 1-year basis, and some years we'd buy full coverage, some years FCMC only, some years a band. We bought a little bit of everything over the years, and because it depended on what our plans were with crop insurance, what our agri stability looked like that year, and then tried to fit Global Ag into that. And that's the best way to make the decision is, looking at all of your numbers at once. There's great tools. We've got a good calculator. M&P's got a good calculator. I'm sure there's others that help you make that decision, but it is a 1 year and every farm is different.
Eileen Torper's asking, how are ag stability payments considered? Are they exempt from reference margin or included?
They're not part of the reference margin.
And I just add to what Dave said is you have to realize that every farm is different and every year is different. So how's the working capital? How strong is the balance sheet? Like, these are discussions that your advisors should be having with you on. It's not just about dollars and cents. A lot of it is about what kind of risk can you take? Do you want to take risk? Every farm is different. And that's part of why I love being an advisor is every discussion I have. I don't have one farm that has the exact same problems as another. And you'd make the assumption that we can talk about land, we can talk about costs, but honestly, every farm has a different opinion on risk and different risk tolerance. And that's going to drive not only what GAR's product you use, but how you mix it in with the other programs.
Well, and on top of that, it's what's the farm's plan in the future? Are you thinking about where you want to be in 5 years? Are you planning on expanding your farm? Do you have a succession plan that you're going to be executing on? Are you sending kids off to school? Do you want to pull money out of the farm so that you can sock it away for a nest egg for retirement? Are you making off-farm investments? And do you want to re-up your machinery? Do you need to invest in all of those plans are part of that's your long-term strategic plan, has to weigh on this year's tactical, what's this year look like? But those long-term plans are a big part of that discussion because you have to protect what you're planning on doing years out because you don't want one bad crop to derail your expansion plan or your whatever the thing that you are trying to execute on long-term.
And I mean, I'm more of a fan of keep it simple, stupid. I have enough complexity in my life, and I'm not as smart as these two giant-headed creatures in front of you. And so I always just say, I like to quote a good buddy of mine and a client of mine, and he always says, I remember farming when I was poor, and I remember farming when I was rich, and I like rich better. And so even though he's balance sheet solid, he just buys fixed margin coverage at $150 or $200. No, FM, both covers. So he's covered top to bottom. And then he goes off and ignores it. It's simple. And especially with ag stability margins as high as they are, if you're in an ag stability claim, effectively the ag stability program is paying 80% of your GAR's premium anyways. And it's a really small risk to sleep easy at night, knowing that the millions of dollars you're putting on the crop are going to come back. To Kevin O'Leary's point, I want my money to come back to me. And GAR's ag stability combo, simple, using the left-hand side and just picking your level, real easy. And I'm always 100% fan of that.
So the vast majority of our customers do buy the full coverage. That's the most common purchase. Then the next most common would be FCMC only. And then everything else gets a small percentage of our purchases, but it's very much when guys are trying to customize and cater it to, agri stability, crop insurance, different things. If anybody knows my dad, people that are on, some people will know my dad. He's a fairly grumpy, mean individual. When he was farming without GARs, he was stressed and always looking at his phone at the next storm that was coming by and watching the weather forecast. And, not that it's kind of, exaggeration, but, kick the dog as you're walking across the yard, kind of pissed off, because he was always stressed. And when we started with GARS and he understood what he bought, and once he understood how he had GARS and AgriStability and how they were working together, his stress level completely changed. And he had a lot more fun farming his last 10 years than he did the first 30. He's retired now. But Global Ag was a big part of that story, where he was farming with knowing what his bottom line was. And he used to say it was a $75,000 sleeping pill. Like he wouldn't be stressed out all night, worrying about a hailstorm that was going to wipe him out, because he knew that if that happened, he was okay. He was covered. He knew his bottom line. And that was a big shift in that, the stress level and the sort of happiness. He was able to be at the lake and not be stressed out in the last 5 years of his farming before he retired. That was a big change. The prior 35 years, he would come to the lake, but then he'd be running back to the farm because he was always worried.
If there was a simple sulfur salesman out there, are they eligible for GARS and AgriStability? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, it's eligible GARS expense. So we would accrue it over, if it's a 4 or 5 year plan, we would accrue one of those years into this year's claim, if you were in a claim, and we'll draw forward. If you've got biosol that you applied 2-3 years ago, a portion of that is eligible for this year's coverage. We just need to know about it in advance. I'll let the accountants talk about AgriStability and how it treats it.
It falls into the same bucket, Dan. The big thing I wanted to say was, you got to realize that you're creating a runway as well, right? So the last few years, I've had some producers that have grown great crops, but I've also had some producers that have probably grown the worst crops they've ever had in Saskatchewan. Yet with the insurance packages, it's kept their AgriStability margins up because of the other insurance products. And then when Dave showed the picture of the AgriStability margin, they drop off the low, drop off the high. So you're essentially have created a roadmap of insurance for the next 3 or 4 years of some really strong coverage levels, even in harder times. So it's like he said, it's more about the forward planning and making sure that we're not decimating our insurance while we're doing these plans. Because a lot of guys will have realized that some of their crop insurance guarantees have dropped this year based on claims, the premiums. It's making sure that the plan doesn't just work for this year, but it does carry forward for the plan going forward.
Good advice, guys. So Laura Shoemaker is asking, Evan, can you clarify the 3 million cap on AgStab?
So this is one that I know quite well, because honestly, when it gets to a certain size of farm, AgStab can only do so much. And what I mean by that is the government's capped it out at a $3 million claim payment. So based on my numbers over a few years, anywhere in that 7,000 to 8,000 acre farm is kind of where the tipping point relies, where you have to at least have another policy large enough to support just for coverage level itself. Because as you get larger, the $3 million doesn't do enough for the farm itself. And it's one of the downfalls of AgriStability for me and for my client book, but we're still utilizing it because, for, as Dave said before, 3 million coverage at that cost, it's no brainer. But for us, we have to watch that the other insurance products work within it, just because for total coverage level, the larger you are, the more risk you're taking on, right?
I love what's happening here. It's an incredible conversation. I'm going to make the corporate decision here. We're going to keep going because really it's free. And if anybody feels it's not worth their time to stick around on the call, God bless you. Thanks for joining. I think I'm going to blast through the hour if we have to here, because I want to get to people's questions. And I just think there's so much great value being offered here. I'm going to break my golden rule of 1 hour. So we're going to keep going. But if you got to get going, you got a hard stop. Does anybody here have a hard stop, or we can go for a little bit more to answer folks' questions? Okay. 3 thumbs up. Barry Rutledge, I'm going to take the liberty of combining your 2 questions for efficiency here. Dave, go back to options, show the difference, say, between AgWrap and FCMC, and show how a claim works. Also, what implications are if taking reduced coverage to lower premiums?
Sure. So, Global Ag's can sound complicated. We try and keep it as simple as possible. But so this is your full coverage. Now let's imagine a world where you grew, your $200, your trigger point, and you only grew $100 of margin. So you're $100 into a claim. So for Global Ag, if you're on the full coverage, you would get $100, 100 cents on the dollar for that gap between what your coverage was and what you actually grew. Now that conversation is exactly the same all the way across. So if you're buying FCMC only, it would cover 100 cents on the dollar. Now, if you were in a negative $50 claim, oops, that's a bad line, but you'll get the point. Full coverage, it would continue to pay, and it will continue to pay all the way down to $0. FCMC only, it stops paying at once you hit zero margin. So negative margin is not covered. You get a discount because you chose to take on that risk yourself. And bands is just an example where we raise that up higher. So you get $100 from the top. $100 is the max payout. And then you're using other insurance or you're going naked for that. And all of these other options. So in this example, SRO 50, you would get paid 50 cents on the dollar. So instead of getting a $100 check, you'd get a $50 check. SRO 75, you'd get a $75 check. Ag wrap, which is just without the band on top, $100 down, your $100 into a claim, you would get a check for $30. And then the Ag wrap 50 and Ag wrap 100, you'd get a check for $50 for the top 50, and then you'd get a check for $30 for the next 50 in this Ag wrap 50 example. So in the Ag wrap 100, you would get paid 100 cents on the dollar because you got that band on top. So each of these options works differently depending on the claim that you're in, because every claim is going to be, every year is different. The math is always going to be different as the different claim amounts, depending on where you are in that coverage, it's going to pay out 100 cents on the dollar, depending on what you buy, or 50 cents or 30 cents or 75 cents, depending on what you buy, the size of that claim and that shared risk option triggers. So
and just to make sure it's clear, the margin calculation is the exact same in every one of those combinations. Yeah. It doesn't take different income, doesn't take different expenses. It's yield really just the payout ratio. Yeah.
Yield times price minus seed for chem. That's our calculation. And that's what you actually grow. It's what you actually are going to sell it for. And it's what you're actually spending on it in the year of production. It's all accrual based. So that payout is pretty simple to calculate, depending on which program you bought. I've seen another question that was there. Where was it here? The implications if you take reduced coverage. So if you take a lower trigger point, so instead of buying $200 cover, you bought $150. Well, it just means that your trigger point before you start collecting on a claim is $50 lower. You probably save $7-8, maybe more, maybe $10 for taking that $50 larger deductible. But the program works the exact same way. Once you start into that claim, you're just further away from being in a claim.
And I think I can go back to one of his original questions on the gap at the top if the insurance products aren't getting high enough. And honestly, some of it for a few of my guys, the cost of production has gotten high enough that the insurance coverages don't get high enough, right, to get to the top. So that's where most of my time is spent. And as Dave said, he sells a lot of full coverage. Dean obviously likes the full coverage. I probably spend a lot more of my time on the right side of the graph, trying to mix it in with other programs. And part of it is that no one program can get high enough with today's cost of production for a lot of farms. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've got lots that are low, but a few that have bumped up with land expansions and the machinery. It's gotten to the point where I need a couple programs just to get the risk off the farm. And to do that, that's where you start seeing some of those reduced coverage levels. So the SRO products, the deductible products, because you're mixing it in with other programs. And I'm the same as everybody else. I don't like high premiums, but first of all, what's high? And second of all, if we need to mix two programs, you're going to pay the fees for both. So let's get some premium down to mix it in so you have the best plan for your farm based on all the programs and not just picking one or the other, right?
Question from Mitchell McPherson. 2011 and 2014 ? flood years for Manitoba, and very few program payments due to that flood must have turned a lot of producers away from the program. That was a long time ago, but that's something that's never forgotten. You guys speak to that?
Well, that's a little bit of the key there, and I'm not an expert in Manitoba crop insurance, but fundamentally, that's what the crop insurance payments cannibalize ag stability. Private insurance, whether it be hail, global ag, or any of the new programs out there, do not cannibalize, and so that's probably the main misunderstanding out there, Dan. And so it's a great question. I'm sure glad they brought it up.
Good stuff. Great to clarify that. Any other comments on that?
Well, there's no, in the year of a flood, if guys didn't seed their farm, they didn't have a lot of eligible expenses. So they didn't have a fertilizer bill, chemical bill, seed bill, because it all stayed in the bins, right? Stayed in the shop. So the agri stability program is tied, your reference margin is based on those eligible expenses plus the reference margin. If you don't have any eligible expenses, well, that reference margin drops. And as Dean said, you probably got a crop insurance payout for $100, $150 an acre. That likely basically chewed away at any agri stability payment you were going to get because you didn't spend any money on crop inputs, and the little bit you didn't spend on utilities, and probably didn't spend much on fuel that year either.
The other thing that happened, Brandon, was there was no kayaking, and dragon boating went away, and a lot of the river overran the banks and ruined the. But go ahead, Evan.
And I mean, we've seen that throughout the program with agri stability, whether it's changes they've made or whether it's one-off years that certain things happened where the margin did drop and guys literally made the opinion it wasn't worth it anymore. We saw that with the margin limit. Most of my pulse guys started pulling out of the program because once, low cost inputs on pulse crops, it didn't make sense anymore. And that goes back to Dean's answer of you can get in and out of the program based on if it's going to work for your farm or not. Most of my guys still have enough expenditures to make it worthwhile to always stay in it. And obviously it's going to benefit this year, but it is an annual discussion you have to have. And it's not just on crop insurance and GARs. It's agri stability as well of, is this the program that fits our farm? Because if you're running a dairy and a livestock and grain, you're right. Diversified wise, the chances of coming into a claim are low, but for that cost, does it still make sense to have that disaster insurance for the farm?
Okay. Miles Thorpe from Langeberg, Saskatchewan, or Spy Hill, I guess, depends how you view it. If you're in a claim position, what is the process for getting claim paid? What do you need to send in for documentation, and what are the timelines?
Assume he's talking about global ag. So you can pick your claim cutoff as early as October. You can pick October, November, December, January, February, March. You pick those months based on the grain you've sold, and then any unpriced grain, we send a price cutoff, and we give you a week to decide, do you want to use that price cutoff or do you want to carry it to the next month? March is the last month, and then all claims get closed in March. The process for getting it paid, the submission, we have a claims package. It's essentially a mini audit. So you send us your GL, you send us the documentation of what you grew for bushels. We send out a bin adjuster. He comes out and measures your bins. Our accounting claims team, Lori and Tanya, they go and basically pull apart your GL and pull out all the eligible expenses for seed, fertilizer, and chemical. They look at all the grain that you've sold based on this crop year. So all of it's first in, first out. And then whatever grain you've got left in the bin, we price based on that published price list. Most claims will take, I'd say, from start to finish, if you participate in the process, about a month to get a check. Sometimes it can be as fast as 2 weeks. Oftentimes, though, if the farmer isn't giving us the little bits of information we're looking for as fast as we might want, it might drag out into a month and a half, 2 months. But I'd say our average is about 30 days if the farmer's playing along.
Awesome. How does hail insurance impact GARs, and is it inexpensive for GARs?
So hail insurance does not, we don't care what hail insurance you buy. Has no impact on the global ag coverage, has no impact on a global ag claim. So blow your hair back, buy all the hail insurance you want to. We don't even look at it. Is GARs expensive? I think is what she's asking. Garza is more money than traditional crop insurance often because we're not subsidized. So without that subsidy, you're paying for the full rate rather than being only 40% like traditional crop insurance. And the difference being though is that we are a more robust program. We cover the yield just like crop insurance, but also what you sell it for, so the market and the quality of the grain, as well as what it costs to grow it for seed, fertilizer, and chemical. And then as well, we also cover things like contract buybacks. So in 2021, we saw a lot of that where guys had grain contracted. They ended up not growing a crop. They had to buy back their position because the prices started to rise due to the drought. And that buyback is part of the revenue calculation. So we cover all of those things. It's more robust, but it is more expensive. I'd say our average premium this year, I think it's currently sitting at $21 or $22 an acre, is what guys are averaging.
But two things on that, Dave. That's why when you talk about robust, and it covers the input cost, it covers the price, it covers the yield and the combination. That's why I'm a big fan of the GARS Ag Stability, because you can buy a financial floor that gives you certainty. The other thing is that $20 an acre, what'd you say your average premium was?
I think it's floating around 22 right now.
And because I'm by nature a cautious accountant, $22 sounds like a lot of money, but Evan, what would be the average full cost of production for an average grower in your portfolio as far as what they're putting on
Ouch.
an acre into the ground?
Can you say that on the internet? Can you say that without breaking the internet?
You're talking inputs or total cost, Dean?
Total cost.
Total cost. I mean, we could range anywhere from 500 to 7.
Yeah. And so the 22 sounds big, but then when you say, okay, this is the amount of money I'm putting out onto the farm to ensure a significant portion of that comes back, significant or all that comes back, it's a big undertaking. And I always find the finance department, whether it be whichever one of the family members is in charge of finances, is always strongly in favor of buying that insurance, because like Dave talked about, it's a sleeping pill.
One, and to be clear, the premium for every farm, it's individually rated. So farms that have had no claims get a very good rate. It gets, I think it's very reasonably priced. Farmers that have had multiple claims over the last 10 years, there's surcharges, and their cost can be quite expensive, but it's based on how many dollars they would have claimed. They get an additional surcharge. And the guys are, it's that expensive because it's worth it, is how I say it. But so every farm, every rate, every farm is different. The amount of coverage and the cost of that coverage is individual. So, that's why we talk like Evan and our advisors, that every farm has to make that decision. It's a 1-year decision, and what products they're going to use. Oftentimes they get a very expensive quote because they've had some claims. There's often ways we can cheapen it up using those different programs on the right side of that graph to cheapen up the premium, because you're carving up the coverage a bit and then combine it with agri stability or combine it with crop insurance.
The other thing that Dave mentioned was the contract buyouts. And I mean, a couple of years ago, this was huge for me. And then obviously this year, it's still a discussion piece, because we're sitting at, let's call it $13 canola. And if things take a jump here in spring, guys are going to want to market. I mean, you're going to want to sell to your profit point. And the issue is that if you're in a drought area, most guys will hold back on the trigger, and you may only get a month or two to do it. And I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where they're going, but I know for us, the reason we utilize it is so that we can actually take advantage when we want to, and then not have to worry about the blowback, as Dave would say, is booking those contracts at a price that works for us and then not growing the grain itself. So it's a strong marketing tool, much like a put or an option or the hedging stuff. It just allows us to market how we want and to do our inputs how we want. Nobody else is telling us how to put the fertilizer in the ground, how much to put, when to put it on. And nobody's telling us when to market our grain, because from our standpoint, we're fully backed. We know our bottom line, and it makes things easy.
Great advice, man. Oof. Good value here. So Andrew Thomas is asking, in regards to a GARS claim position, when can the grower expect to receive the payout? Looking to compare with SCIC claims that are usually received within the same crop year?
Yeah. So historically, back years ago, we wouldn't even start working claims until March. But about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we changed our process so that you could get your claim paid in as early as end of October. So farmers can choose. Do they want to get their money in October? Then we have to cut off their claim, or they can choose November, December, January, February, March. If they wait until March, they're probably not going to see their claim until end of April. But they've carried all of that risk of the grain that they're holding all the way through till March. So, they don't get their money, but they also get the carry.
The other thing that allows guys to do, Dan, is they get to make the choice of when they want to stop or start their claim. So for example, this year, guys that started October, November, and then we watched the grain drop. I've got guys now that are going to start claims this month based on the price, the drop in price from November on. But I mean, that's the strength.
They saw that canola go from $16 to $13, and now Global Ag is on the hook for the grain they hadn't sold at the $13 price instead of the $16 price we had back in the fall. And that's built into the program.
And the lentil growers felt the opposite effect. Lentils moved exact opposite of that. So hindsight, Dan, next time I'd like you to have a 100% guarantee for canola price prediction. We'd sure appreciate if you get that on your next podcast.
Yeah, no, we can insert that. No charge for that. Just keep coming back. We'll give you some more of that hizzle jizzle juice. Barry Rutledge is saying, Dave, make a video of what you just did and put it on your website. I don't know, maybe you can you got to get like a TikTok account going here, but just on that note, we will be providing the recording, and I think we're going to snip out some of this wisdom and put it on the internet because people want it. Explain how GARS works in a wet year when 30% of crop is seeded.
So your farm, when you buy your insurance, you declare how many acres you are intending to seed, and that's based off of the history and the acres you control. Let's say you're a 10,000 acre farm. You say you're going to seed 10,000 acres. You say you're going to put, you tell us what your crop inputs are. You buy a $200 an acre full coverage. Now he only seeds 7,000 acres because the other 3,000 are too wet. After seeding, he can choose, do I want to reduce my coverage to the 7,000 acres and get my premium back for the 3,000 that I didn't plant? Or do I want to leave my coverage at 10,000 acres? And the margin that we're going to calculate in the fall is going to be based on 10,000 acres at the $200 margin coverage plus his inputs. So the farmer has the choice. Do I want to hold the line? Do I want to pay the premium and have my calculation based off of 10,000 acres? Or do I want to save the premium and have my calculation in the fall based on the 7,000 that I seeded? It's the farmer's choice.
This is not your first rodeo, hey?
Pretty much answered every question one time or two or 10. But
what do you think, Evan?
If we're talking about flood, that has to be Manitoba clients, because right now I don't think I've had a discussion about flood in Saskatchewan.
It's biblical out here.
It's biblical. We're gonna have to part the waters to get to the tractor. Okay, we've got great questions still coming in here. I think this is highly productive. Brent Tremblay, thank you for the question. Evan, what is an average dollar per acre farms are spending on all insurance per year? Go.
It's a good question. So because I have clients from across the entire province, obviously different geographies, different risk profiles, guys that have gone through drought, guys who haven't, I probably have one of the widest flips of cost per acre. I've got guys that have utilized all three programs and still been in that, let's call it 20 or less, 15 to 20. And then I've got some guys that are pushing up 30, 35. And the reason for that is, if we've gone through multiple droughts and the balance sheet is scary and we don't want to take that risk, or we want to sleep this year, it's the cost of doing business. And for me, I try to convince my guys it's a fixed cost, and don't get me wrong, that's a hard sell for guys. But for me, it is. If you're gonna take on the land expansions, if you're gonna buy the new iron, if you're gonna take the risk on, we're gonna make sure we insure, and it's gonna cost X. And for us, that's just another cost that's built into the budget. And it's the guys who want to push. And if you're not going to push and you keep your expenses low, I mean, that's a form of insurance itself, right? By keeping your expenses low, you aren't going to need to go outside and spend the $30 an acre you might have to spend as other farms do, but you're also not expanding or you're not taking those other risks. So it's really across the board, but that would be my range, probably anywhere from 15 to 35.
And I'd say, whatever that range is, probably gone up in the last 2 years.
Oh yeah.
We've seen all insurance, crop insurance and global ag and just insurance in general, P&C, life, whatever, have all gone up because of the cost of capital. So the interest rates impact the cost of insurance, because the capital that you tie up for insurance risk could be earning a risk-free rate on a government T-bill, with essentially little or no risk. So you have to get that minimum rate. So all of those rates have to get built into the insurance. And then at the same time, we've had multiple droughts, as well as the insurance industry has seen the wildfires. We've had tsunamis, we've had earthquakes, different things. The insurance industry has taken a bit of a beating over the last number of years. And Canada was considered a safe haven for insurance companies, but then, the 2021 drought ended up triggering, global ag had big payouts, but so did all of the crown corporations. They all had triggered their reinsurance. So all of those claims are now piling into the premium, because it's a combination of the cost of money plus the historical risk, and that historical risk has gone up because of past performance.
And I mean, if you want something to back that, go and look at your P&C insurance for the farms these days. I mean, ours has doubled in the last 3-4 years. So, I mean, as Dave said, it's the whole insurance industry. And obviously, if you spend any time on Twitter lately or X, obviously you're seeing the premiums of SCIC are feeling it too. So it's a industry-wide issue. It's not just global ag risk, or it's not just SCIC. It's a cost of doing business.
Hopefully accountant fees are staying low. Hey, Dean.
Minimizing accounting fees is always my number one objective and goal, Dan.
I appreciate you. I see you. I hear you. This could be the last question before we wrap things up, but it's been excellent. Mitchell McPherson is asking, do crop insurance payments take away from a potential GARS payment?
No impact. You can buy whatever other insurance you want, and global ag is not worried about what you collect from somebody else. So it does not impact the GARS claim payment.
Final question: if you've got an insurance salesman and a farm consultant and an accountant on the line, how do you screw in a light bulb? Just kidding. I actually don't know. It's terrible. Should have worked harder to prepare on that one, but I don't know where I was going with that one. But I mean, it's been incredible. I hope that folks on here feel like they got their money's worth. I'm feeling like, we can at least have a plan and look at things, with the help of experts and consultants. That's our main thing, I think, is working with coaches and experts and people in the industry that give you some clarity. And what an opportunity to keep going and keep investing. And obviously, growing yield is still going to be the way forward. There's not a strategy of going in the other direction on that. So I would ask the group here, I guess, for final comments, unless we have a question coming in. But just to wrap it up, we'll go counterclockwise from Dean to Evan to David. What are your final comments, and what is the final message you want folks to take home from this very, very fruitful, productive conversation? Dean?
Get your insurance figured out, and then forget about it, and then be empowered to go grow the best crop you can. That's paramount, because what I've seen time and time again is folks being afraid of the results and be cautious on growing a crop and not take advantage when the market and Mother Nature threw them a good one. And you can't ever measure that. So get yourself well tooled and well heeled on the insurance front, and then just go have a great growing season. Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you, Dean. Evan?
I think it mirrors what Dean says a little bit. I mean, obviously we do have some mental health issues in ag, so it ties back into that of, guys, it's right now everything's gloom and doom, but based on what we've shown you today and based on the discussions we're having today, it's just another year. if you utilize the right strategies in place and go for it and make sure you're backstopped, this is just another year. And everybody on this call, I think, wants to see you succeed. So that's based on why we're here this morning, Dan. So
awesome, Evan. Thanks so much for coming on as well. David, you got the final word. You can bring this home. It's been incredible. I'm glad that we decided to do this, aren't you?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Plug for Biosol. We like seeing Biosol and guys crop plans that we look at agronomic decisions and management decisions, and I'd say oftentimes we see really great numbers on farms that are managing their sulfur with Biosol, and that long-term planning that takes is a strong indication of good management. So, we like working with you. It's been great. I appreciate the opportunity to come on. And as the other two said, it's, you got to take a look at your insurance, set it, forget it, and go farm the heck out of it. Like the insurance is just there for the bad year. But if you got the right insurance, it actually helps you farm and market and do the best job you can in all the rest of the years and go swing for the fences. Agri stability this year is going to be more important than people realize. I think it's got a bit of a bad rap, and we're out trying to spread that news. I think farmers need to take another look. A little bit of time in the office is probably going to be well spent this year, and they might be pleasantly surprised on what they have for coverage, which might take a lot of that stress away, as Evan is saying. So appreciate the opportunity to come on and share it. And we've got a few more weeks before we get into the field. So let's, get this insurance decision behind us.
Dan, next time we get the four of us together, let's do it and sample some of those scotch in the background. And then we'll have real entertainment on your podcast.
Oh, yeah. Take it to the next level. Well, I'm really honored, and it was a huge pleasure to not only have you folks on the webinar and showcase your expertise and the plan that you can provide to producers, not only financially, but Evan touched on it and David touched on it with the story of his father. We all want to take joy in our endeavors. Farming is the greatest business in the world. I'm incredibly blessed and grateful to be part of it. And it's also great to call you guys friends. I can call you up and say, hey, do you want to do this crazy little bit? But I hope, I pray everybody's got tremendous value from the conversation today and feels a little bit more of a spring in your step, because maybe it's time to shut down Twitter and go talk to a coach about how to manage, what we got on our hands right now. But it's just another year, like you say. And I'm honestly, we're in business as well, challenges are opportunities, and lots of times the biggest opportunities you thought were amazing turned out to be bigger challenges than you thought. So grind it out, folks. 2024, let's go get it. Thanks for joining on behalf of Aberhart Ag Solutions. Everybody have a great day. We're going to put the recording up, and we'll see you in the funny pages, I guess. Thanks, guys. Here we go, everybody.